hear me? Just a little? I need to be a little louder. I must sound like God. And as God, I say, you guys did a wonderful job. Let's give them another round of applause. That was a Brian Eitner original. Today this topic is accepting miracles. If you were around last week, you know, I believe there's a very special energy going on here in 2020. Real sense of opportunity. And it's important for us to be in a phase where we're ready to accept miracles in our lives. This can be the year that things that have eluded us all along for so many years can unfold. This can be the year when something we did not think was possible can happen right there in our lives. So today, if I'm talking about miracles, my purpose in today's talk is to shake your faith in reality. Because we're pretty sure reality is pretty real, right? We're pretty sure it's pretty solid. No, that's just reality. And sometimes we get ourselves trapped into believing what can be and specifically what cannot be. Today I want to talk about what's outside the box. Because sometimes we think the box is all there is. The physical law can't be broken. That patterns have got control of my life and that's just the end of it. And when something happens outside the box, and it does, we call that a miracle. But like so many other things in our life, like magic and this and that and the other, we say, well, it's just a legend. And I'm here today to say miracles are not a legend. They're very, very real. They happen every single day. You see, science suggests that everything falls within certain laws, and nothing happens beyond that. Now, as a scientist, I got to tell you, I'm kind of right there with them. You say, scientist? Yeah, I actually intended to be an engineer before I ended up doing something entirely the opposite. And so, with that bent on things, in the book I wrote, I even described myself as a spiritual engineer. I've never totally given it up. But I know that things happen beyond the limits. Here we are in science, and they say, I'm sorry, these are physical laws, they are immutable, they don't break. Until we start exploring cryogenics, and there we say, well, actually, they don't hold here. Or subatomic physics, and we go, yeah, it definitely doesn't hold here. And suddenly there are all these exceptions to what never changes. Whereas the traditional physicist will say, I'm sorry, that is not possible. The theoretical physicist, who is now trying to suggest to us we need to look at reality in an entirely different way, says every time you look at the world, out of all the infinite possibilities, you pull together one. You say, well, why does it happen to be the same one everybody else sees? Well, because we kind of share that universal agreement. How we do it, we have no idea. But science is suggesting at this point, reality is not as solid and immutable as we have always thought it to be. So why is it so far-fetched that something could happen outside the box? You see, most of the time, we agree on universally accepted reality. But every once in a while, in some way that we don't understand, we make a shift. And somehow we embrace a different version of reality. And the reality we're facing literally shifts, alters, changes. And we go, a miracle! When you say that, you're just saying this is something outside the box. And life really does exist outside the box. Miracles are real. They don't happen all the time. But they do happen. And generally when they're needed most. What we want to do is open ourselves up this year and start accepting that miracles can be happening in my life. That things can happen. For instance, my daughter can move to Boston and still show up in church on Sunday morning in Florida. Stand up, Lindsay. You don't get to see her every week. Now, the real miracle is there's two of them there. Josh is right there beside her. He came all the way from Longwood. Just like I did. Okay, we're going to try to break up your belief in static reality. Because you got to embrace the possibility of something outside the box if you ever want to experience something outside the box. So I'm just going to have to tell you what I've seen. I have literally in my life seen thousands of miracles. Real miracles. See, as ministers, we're in this unique position to have people come and share with us experiences when they have had something happen that's totally outside the box. We get to pray with people and then go, whoa, that was a coincidence. When something phenomenal happens. And on our own spiritual paths, sometimes we encounter stuff that we cannot explain. Period. It's just beyond possibility. I've seen miracles of healing. I've seen this stuff. I'm not just taking the legends. I've literally seen it happen. Healing. I've seen miracles of supply. Something coming out of nowhere all of a sudden when it was needed most. I've seen miracles of opportunity, miracles of transformation. And since I'm big into nature, I've seen miracles of nature responding in ways that we don't believe are possible. But it does. And before long, you learn to accept. You can't put it in a neat little package. Life has experiences outside the box. And we want to open up to them this year. Because then they can be our greatest blessings. The thing that we have finally determined will never happen in my life can happen this year. If we're willing to open up just a little bit. So, what have I seen? Well, I'm first going to start with the things that, you will truly know I'm not in my right mind. But I've literally seen physical laws broken. I don't mean bent, I mean broken. Enough that I know that though most of the time you can trust it, every once in a while, something impossible happens. Oh, simple little things. I'll give you some crazy ones. I've seen two bodies in the same space. You say, what? Two bodies move until they shared exactly the same space. And then after a little while come apart again. That's not supposed to be possible. I've seen Physical things move. I didn't see them move. I just know I put it there and it came here. I remember in particular, I was at a conference in Venice, Florida, a long, long time ago. And you'll know how long it is ago because I'm going to talk about having real keys to your room in the motel that is stuck in a little box behind the counter that is labeled with your room number. And I remember when I checked out, I had had one key the entire time I was there. And when I checked out, I watched very distinctly as I handed this key, and I had had a really good and really amazingly mystical experience during my time there. And so I kind of watched that key disappear. I watched him take it. I watched him go up, put it into the wooden compartment back there, the slot where the key for my room went. And then I drove home. And when I got home, that key was in my pocket. Now, the first thing I wanted to do was explain it away. I must not have remembered it right. Well, number one, I was in my 20s. My memory was quite good. And number two, it had only been 2.5 hours. And yes, I wanted to say, you got it wrong. That's not possible. And that's the first thing we try to do when we have a miracle. We try to explain it away because it's really scary if we can't depend on the rules. And our whole being shakes a little at the thought that something can happen that's not possible. But I had to turn it around and say, hey, I really did watch that happen. And I really do still have it in my hand now. And so I kept that key to Venice for a year. And after a year, I went to the Venice church and took it over. I have no idea how that's connected. But I had the key to Venice. I don't know. What is this? It's outside the box. Sometimes things happen in life you cannot understand, and those are sometimes the most exciting. I've seen miracles of coincidence. You say, well, that was a coincidence. Yeah, except that it happened way too often and far too long to really be a coincidence. Several of my miracles of coincidence happened out in that area out in Colorado, where my parents' home was, and I worked on it by myself for years. And I was out there. I have had the luxury of spending 6 weeks alone. I mean alone. And I say it's a luxury because there's a certain strength you can gain from solitude. However, every week when you go to town, you're starved for people. So on the way in, I'm driving from Aguilar to Trinidad on I-25. And as I'm driving along, I'm looking in all the cars at the people. Wow, there's a person in there and another one in there. And I pass this one car and I look in and I go, oh my God, I know these people. And so I'm in the truck, and I'm not dressed like a minister. On the land, I can look just a little wild. And I'm motioning them off the road. It scared the tar out of them. They thought they were about to be robbed. Finally, they did pull off. And I pull over and I say, hi, Alan. And he stops and says, oh my God, he knows me. And he looks and finally, through all the mess, recognizes me. Says, Bob. You know, and he was the ex-CEO of the Association of Unity Churches, leaving Kansas City. And he was on his way to take over his church in California. And I drove by him on I-25 and pulled him off the road to say hi. You'd think that was the end of the story. But I told the story to Dad later. I was out there alone. But when I saw Dad, I told him the story. He also was a Unity minister. And he said, I remember, I was there. And I said, no, you weren't. I was alone. And he thought a second, and he went, you're absolutely right, because the time I remember, I was alone. And I went, what? And he said, I didn't pull off Alan, I pulled off his predecessor. I was going down this same stretch of highway. I passed him on I-25, saw it was him, and motioned him over and said hi, and did exactly what you did. He was on his way to go take over a church in California. What does that mean? I have no idea. I just know it's outside the box. Things don't happen like that. I just know there's a lot more going on in this world, and there are a lot more possibilities than we accept. And we got to open up and realize things we thought weren't possible are. They really are. Silent Unity. They have had millions upon millions of miracles reported when they pray with people. I mean, we're talking real stuff. Major things that just are totally unexplainable. Silent Unity's been around for 100 years, so they've had some time. When I was in ministerial school in the 70s, this was back before the internet, so I had a friend who worked in Silent Unity, and he was in the letter writing department. In that day and age, you either wrote a letter in asking for prayers or you called in. And for those who wrote in, my friend in the letter writing department had to write back and use the Unity prayer thoughts and say, we hold that you are perfect, we hold that this will work out for you. Basically put it in writing for him and send it. And one day his supervisor called him in and said, you might want to see this letter back. You see, he had written a letter. He really had a hard time with it. He struggled. A 15-year-old girl wrote in and said, I have had my stomach surgically removed. I mean, literally removed. And I can't eat, but I want to be able to eat again. I want to have a normal life. Will you pray with me? He struggled. How do we as human beings think that such a thing that's so impossible can happen? But you set yourself aside and allow that something greater can move through you, and you pray with someone. And so he wrote out his prayer. She's writing back 6 weeks later to say, I have had a complete healing. I just ate my first hamburger. How does that happen? And Silent Unity has got millions of those. The bottom line is miracles happen. Said I had the miracle of nature responding. If you've been around very long, you've somewhere in the past heard my story of my roses that I was growing in Fort Pierce. When I was a minister in Fort Pierce, I grew roses. I kept them in pots because I knew I was only going to be there for a year or two. 12 years later, they were still in pots. In either case, I've got all these roses in pots, and I finally thought, I want to take them all in for Easter. I want them all to be blooming for Easter, but roses don't bloom on the same schedule. So here they are, they're all over the place, And I went out and looked at my 10 or so roses in pots and said, well, I had a long conversation with them. But they were my roses, so I'm allowed to have a conversation with them. And to the one that was already blooming early and was going to be long gone before Easter, I said, you got to slow down, you got to stop. And there was another one, no way on earth it would ever be in bloom by Easter. And I said, you got to speed up and go like crazy. And miraculously, all of them were blooming for Easter. The white one, the one that was started, stopped. And for 10 days, blooms that were half open stopped and stood still. And the red one, the one that you couldn't even see whether the buds were starting yet, it was in full bloom. It was out. It made it. How on earth they did that? I have no idea. But they were my roses, and they chose to respond to me. That is outside the box. But it does happen. And of course, the big one was the time that I decided to go watch the sunrise and meditate while looking out at the ocean, watching the sunrise. And of course, that morning that I chose turned out to be a gale force storm. But being stubborn, I grabbed my blanket and went out there anyway. If you've been around, you've heard, I told it even not too long ago, but here are all these water missiles just flowing. It is not falling vertically. It is flowing horizontally in that wind. So all these things are flying and stinging, so I covered up as much skin as I could, drew my hoodie around until just a little bit of my face was showing, and I guess I was finally able to meditate. Because partway through, I'm going, oh, the storm has passed. It's all peaceful around me, I realize. I've been kind of gone, but it's all peaceful around me now. And so I slowly open my eyes for an open eye meditation. And when I get my eyes open, I realize that storm has not left. It is raging all around me. Those missiles are still blowing straight at me, but as they approach, they are rising and going over me and coming back down after they leave me. If you go 3 foot out in any direction, you're in the midst of a raging storm. But where I am, it's peaceful. It's sedate. It's protected. And nature has accepted me. That's probably the time when I started repeating that phrase that my daughter will remember very clearly. Nature is my friend. It won't hurt you. Nature is my friend. I said it all my life while she and I were standing out watching thunderstorms. The lightning won't get you. Nature is my friend. Hey, she's not dead, so it worked. And it kind of brought to mind the story that Ellie and Ethel founded this church. And Ellie told the story of when he was young. And he took Charles and his second wife, Cora, on a trip out west. He said, Charles only asked me because I had a new car. I think there was more to it than that. But in any case, he said we were out west and this sandstorm was coming in. We were in this area in this major sandstorm. And Papa Charlie said, stop the car, Ellie. I want to meditate in the sandstorm. Okay. And he pulls off, and Papa Charlie throws the door open, swings his legs out, and faces the outside, and sitting there on the seat, but half out of the car, starts meditating. And Ellie's thinking, well, this is the end of my car. He said he meditated through that whole sandstorm. And when it was done, there was not a single grain of sand on Papa Charlie or in the car. These are all things that happen outside the box. When you move into certain states of consciousness, I'm sorry, the physical rules don't count anymore. They've shifted. Reality shifts. And we call it a miracle when that happens. But of course, if we're going to talk about miracles, we have to talk about healing, right? Unity started with healing. And I have the strangest of stories. When I was 23, the associate minister in Miami, I'd just arrived, took the kids to the beach. I didn't know Floridians didn't swim in January. And the kids didn't mind. They swam anyway. But I did manage to roughhousing around, really put some nasty gashes in my shoulder on the coral rock. And I'm in the back of a van. We're driving home. Somehow I wasn't driving. I was riding. And I'd been teaching the kids, these teenagers, how to use their hands with hand vibrations for healing. And one of the girls saying, okay, we're going to heal that for you. And I said, you can't do that, and da-da-da-da. And finally, they decided they're going to show the unbeliever. So 2 of them get up there with their hands all around my shoulder, and I literally watched the redness depart and the wounds start to close. And they turned to their friend and said, "See, you didn't think we could do it." It happens. All the time I refer to the woman when I first came to this church who came to me, and she had a book about her story. She had totally been healed of 4th stage breast cancer. Gone. I've talked with people who had broken bones healed in 20 minutes. Is that possible? It seems to be. And I came into the ministry under a minister by the name of Grover Thornsbury when he was at New Thought Unity in Cincinnati, Ohio. My dad got close enough to him to know his story because Dad went out to ministerial school from there. And Grover's story was that he had gotten a degenerative disease, that he went into the VA hospital and they told him he would never leave. They said, no one has ever, what you have is rare and no one has ever recovered from this. You will get worse and you will not leave this hospital. But through prayer over a period of time, he was completely healed. They wouldn't let him out right away because they couldn't believe he'd actually been healed. Even though all their testing said so, they were sure it was going to return at any moment. Finally, they let him go. And that's why he became a Unity minister. And in this church, a number of years back, we had a man by the name of John. I went to visit him in the hospital because he was going in for emergency surgery the next day. He had a blockage that was life-threatening. It was a major blockage. There was no doubt in their minds. And they had scheduled surgery for the next day. I arrived, and suddenly 2 more men arrived from the congregation. None of us had planned it, but with John, that makes 4 of us. And we finally held hands with John in a circle, and we prayed. And when I left and walked away, I went, this is the strangest experience. I feel like something happened. And the next day the doctors went in and said, we were wrong. There is nothing in there. You have no problem. No blockage, no nothing. We must have gotten it wrong. That's the doctor's answer for every miracle. We must have gotten it wrong. Healing. It's real. It really happens. I suppose I got one more territory. The most common of the miracles is the miracle of supply. I've seen thousands. Jobs, checks coming in when they had to come in, amazing opportunities coming out of nowhere when they were needed most. The right people arriving to meet the need. All showing up when they were prayed for. This stuff happens. The church itself, when we were building the building. We got the main part of the building up, but we had other things we had to do, including the pews and some of the outside sidewalks and some of the extras that had to be done to finish up the project, and we're running out of money. And finally, as a board, we decided we got to stop. We're going to have problems if we keep going. And so at a board meeting, we said, okay, we'll stop. We will not finish. We'll try to use what we've got, but we will not finish unless the money shows up. And at the end of that board meeting, we prayed, and our prayer was, God, show us the money. That movie was popular back then. Show us the money or we're going to stop. And that week a check came in, and 2 weeks later another check from the same person, both amounting to $60,000. we finished the building. I don't know, I call that a miracle. These things happen all the time. The outer world is not as rigid and rule-bound as we think. There are exceptions. There are exceptions to every rule. And there are exceptions to the rules that limit our lives. I have seen miracles, they happen. Now, I have also seen miracles not happen. Okay? Often that happens when people are trying too hard. Trying too hard normally means there's fear on the ground. Sometimes it happens when people think they can think their way to a miracle. You got to get beyond your mind. You got to go into your heart and feel it, experience it. But the truth is, you cannot create a miracle. And you cannot make it happen. That's just impossible. That truly is impossible. But you can prepare a place in your life to receive the gift of a miracle. And God is always trying to give you the miracle you need. You can't make it happen. But you can open up and become receptive and be ready to receive the gift. So what I want to do today, and you're saying you're going to do this now, 5 qualities to cultivate that will open the way to miracles for life. And I'm going to do it really, really quickly. I know you don't believe I can, but I will. Number 1, yes, it will be a miracle. Each one of them I'm going to basically present as a scripture. Most of them from one of Jesus' miracles. The first one, though, is not. I'm going to steal from last week when we did Matthew 19:26. With God, all things are possible. The first step is you've got to know physical reality is not king. Yes, it rules most of the time, but it's not king. Miracles can happen. Number 2, Matthew 9:28. This is the healing of the blind man. The blind man came up to him, and Jesus said to them, "Do you believe I can do this?" They said to him, "Yes, our Lord." Then he touched their eyes and said, "Let it be done to you according to your faith." And immediately their eyes were opened. So do you believe it can happen in your life? It's not enough to believe miracles are possible. You've got to believe your miracle is possible. And number 3, Matthew 8:24 and 26, the stilling of the storm. Behold, the sea became very rough, so that the boat was almost covered by the waves. Jesus got up and rebuked the wind and the sea, and there was a great calm. We have to turn away from the fear, the threat. We've got to rebuke the negativity if we're going to have our calm. We've got to say to these negative conditions, "You have no power over me." And then turn away completely. And concentrate on goodness as we place our life in God's hands. Okay. I am going to tell one more story because it makes my point. I have a good friend, Neil, in California. His stepson married a girl from China. Now, she does English quite well, but her mother came over to join her, and her English is terrible. And she wasn't feeling well, so she went to the doctor. And the doctor went at some length, explained to her that she only had 3 months to live. And this woman shook her head and said, yes, yes, because she didn't understand a word he was saying. So she left that, and it was a little while before the family realized she had not gotten it. And then they had this discussion, because in China, you don't tell people they're going to die. Here you do. Okay? And they finally decided, she's dying in 3 months. What's the point? Just let her do her thing. Well, she never knew she was supposed to die in 3 months. So she lived another 10 years. You need to not know that the negative thing is going to happen, that the threat is going to take command of your life, and go on and live in the goodness that's still available to you. Number 4, Luke 9:16. This is the feeding of the 5,000. Jesus took 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish and looked up to heaven and blessed them. Take stock of what you got and bless it. Jesus did not take it and say, you want me to feed this crowd with this? That isn't what happened. He said, it is enough. He blessed it. And what are we going to do? We're going to have to take stock of what we have in our lives right now and where I am, and bless where I am. We've got to say this is a blessing. It doesn't look like one, but it is. Some good will come out of this. And it leaves us with number 5, the last one. This is the raising of Lazarus, right? Jesus was disturbed because of the mourners. I've included this because this is really important. Jesus was disturbed because of the mourners. And he went to the tomb. He went on to the tomb. Jesus said, did not I say to you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God? Jesus lifted his eyes upward and said, O Father, I thank thee, for thou hast heard me, and I know that thou hearest me always. He said this out loud so the people around him knew what he was doing. He called with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. And the dead man came out. There's 2 lessons. First is the mourners. You're going to have to get beyond the mourners. You're going to have to banish them. You're going to have to banish the sadness, the fear, the misery. You got to banish that, because that's going to hold you back. And then you got inner gratitude. Jesus did gratitude before every one of his miracles. In this case, he made sure you knew it. Gratitude is the most powerful invitation to a miracle in your life that you can have. Living in gratitude opens up a whole bunch of things outside the box. So, conclusion. And hey, in exactly the same amount of time I did in the first service. And no, I'm sure you didn't think I could get through that quickly. This is not a complete list of the spiritual qualities leading to miracles. There are other things. But if you worked with these 5 qualities, you're going to open up. You're going to see yourself start to live a little bit beyond the box. Number 2, miracles are real. Never forget that. These are not legend. They are real. There are experiences in life that fall outside the box, and you don't have to put them back in. You're allowed to live outside the box. You can't create a miracle. I'll guarantee you of that. But you can prepare fertile ground that will allow you to receive that gift that we call a miracle. And God is always ready to bring into your life. So if we open our consciousness just a little bit this year to the possibilities of miracles, one or many. 2020 can become the year of miracles in our lives. Just because I'm going to give up saying it can't happen. I'm going to be open and receptive to whatever good God has for me. So let's close our eyes. Father, give us the strength to reach beyond the universally accepted version of reality, to see your spiritual forces moving in our lives and creating miracles. We are open and receptive. We believe it can happen in our lives, and we are immensely grateful. Thank you, God. Amen. And if the ushers will come forward, we'll prepare for our offering.